Hey everyone, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I had the exact time. I want to make sure that these are, I think they're right. And like I said, it's kind of between that 3:38 to 3:39, so it should be here. There's about roughly a 4-minute window, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5 minutes, I guess. So, and like I said, we're working with like roughly 3:31 to 3:38. 3:38, 3:39 seems to be the cutoff point though, so I probably don't want to extend too much longer here, specifically at a 71, 73, 71 retest. This is the most ideal time to do it here. 152 was the most calculated, and then 153. 157 is also a flip, so this is calculated and a flip point, but these are the points in time that I think are likely the most ideal to re-trigger the 7-1. First area was a 6-950, so, but the big spot honestly is the 7-1. So these are the intervals. These are them. This one here, these 3 minutes here. Okay, let me just make sure. Again, because this is what could also lead to those like 350s, 370s that we talked about, but more wider range into like here. These ones are what would extend till end of session today, guys. Okay, so a lot of these run until close. Do you see this? Like a lot of these, they run until end of day. So that's why this point in time is super important, especially to try clearing this 7-1 spot again. So we might have a, yeah, our cutoff is 157. I was right. You should have sound. My mic's not muted. Okay. So let's see. And then I was using a 64 and 63 minute just because they had good alignment with the range that I had in here. And this flips at 216, and the 63 does flip at 157. And what I mean by range is the range in time it took from our calculated spots, basically. So let me show you. Oh my god, this is so messy. Basically from here, okay, I don't know if you guys can see this, to here. This was roughly 62, 64, 65, 63 minutes. So you could use those intervals if you want. And I figured that it would be roughly the same in this range in here, but you could also use, especially right here, I don't know if you guys can see that, like off these ranges here. So they definitely work, but you could also just use the 63 minute. Do we have any catalysts this afternoon? Like after 2? Because this period's the most important time of day. This period here, okay, for coming back and reclaiming and retesting. Forex Factory. I didn't think we did, but I don't know. I could be wrong. Okay, let's see here. This would be... There was a flip or odd at 201, but this isn't related to our intervals. Something else I noticed too is the rough like 5 to 6 minute offset, and that kind of started from yesterday when back in here when they stalled. Okay, I don't know if that'll continue into today, but if they did do something like this is what could increase volatility. So it's like roughly 6 to 12 minute period, okay? And so that would be the case if they broke 7-1 after, let's say, 157. It's not the worst case scenario since we have odds in here, but that would increase volatility, okay? So ideally I would like them to do it in here, but that 7 minute range kind of falls, 7 to 14 minute range I think kind of just falls into this, okay? So it would be, it's okay, it's just not ideal, okay? So kind of like here, okay, if they broke like just after these intervals here, they should align with like the 04, okay, 05. But these are the points in time that I ideally want to come back and retest highs by. So I do want to be above 7-1 at least. So let's see. And I could be off, but 157 seemed like the time. And Apple, yes, Apple should break here, and it should break right to our calculated spot. Wow, they did. You guys, that is insane. This was the offset on Apple, so I figured when it does break to 87.47, it has to test 287.74. That is insane. That's so impressive on Apple. It broke exact range. So this sets Apple up now to get to this 292, 293. I'm basically targeting the 300 ranges on Apple, but you can kind of start with that there. They stalled 71, 70.50. That's not bad. I just would be a little bit cautious here, I guess, into like the next few minutes. I really want them to try retesting high of day around this period, so I don't want to ruin our odds of that. Because this is the best point in time to do that. Because I don't know if you guys can see here. Okay. That's why I'm saying there's still a buffer, because do you see the price action that occurred just after that, like on those breaks of 3827? We basically want the same thing to happen, which is why I'm saying there's a 339-minute cutoff, at least to test 70, 71. I wanted them to break 71 though. I'm gonna mark the 201 on here just because that was off the 63-minute calculation. I'll just make that a different color so we know it's not linked to these wider ranges. But they're doing the 4 to 7 minute offsets that I was talking about. So the only reason it's okay is because we have those higher odds. But 73, 71 being tested here finally. You guys can expect a lot of volatility in over the next 15 to 20 minutes. This is the most important period for the market today. Okay, so this is basically what could get us to, long story short, to here, to 74.20s. Okay, and that doesn't necessarily have to be today, but this is what keeps us at least in play for 883, 86, 88, and specifically off these time intervals here today. 7371 being tested and 71 being taken out right at the 2 o'clock window. So this is still okay. I just want to see, this was my highest odd for the 204 to 205. This period here was my highest odd for like high a day retest. Okay, this made the most sense. And we have some extensions through 211, 214, 14, 13, 15. This period here is so important for expansions, okay? So if we're going to try retesting and breaking, ideally we'd want it to be now. What was high of day? 73, 75, which is also a 44-point break, I think we said off open right here, right? So breaking that is what would set us up for those next intervals of roughly... I mean, if we're using core intervals, it'd be like 52, 55, 58. But if we kept extending off 44, 20, this is basically also 22 points here on this break. Hence, we really wanted to break this area here, okay? And that's what could set us up for yet another 22-point break, which is basically 7,400. Okay, an 88-point break would be huge, obviously, but that's what would link to these areas here. Okay, is everyone on the same page? Those are the intervals I'm using today, and these are the times to do that by. Okay, so this is basically a 22-point test from here. It's kind of hard to see. I'm just going to delete these so it's a bit easier to see here. Okay, this is what we want to break. We want to try breaking 17, 22. 22 is what's going to get us those structure breaks. So around 7.6, 7.8. And this is the best time of day to do it. I hope they do this by 204 or 205. What do you guys think? You think that this is what I analyzed earlier this afternoon, back in here, when I signed off for a bit. Do you guys think we'll clear highs by Izzy's calculated time? And that's in like the next, I can only set this for a minute because it's coming up pretty quick. So at this point in time had the best odds for a high of day retest. And specifically this 213 to 215. This is also the period, by the way, that could really imply volatility, is specifically because they did break a tiny bit late to test 7-1 here. So if you guys can vote on that. So I would expect some volatility to start coming in right here. And we're already seeing that so far. That's exactly why I would have preferred that they broke during this period, at least 7-1. Because then we can start seeing some of these psych out sticks. And these are probably what's linked back to highs. I would bet anything. Yes, it is. Do you see that? So 2.5 point reductions are linked exactly to our high of day, which is all-time highs technically at 72.75. Okay, so it's okay that they did that before 204.05, because our best window today is here. This is the highest probability window I had. Okay. Yes, there are some late odds that were around 225, 230, 235. This is always a window I watch, but the poll is done. It's gone. I only had it set to a minute. But so it's basically this window here between 204 to 205, I think was the more calculated, but 204 to we can just say 216. The higher odds were around 211, 213, 215, but it's going to look very messy if I just mark them all in there. 05 was the highest odd. I don't know if that odd reduced now, though, since they didn't tag 7-1. So I wonder if there might be like a tiny reduction or something. We'll see. Okay, I have to do something right now. That's why I didn't want to. This is like the worst time for this to break. I don't want to get up either because I have some dailies still too. I did take some calls for tomorrow off the 5-8 hold here, which I have to be very careful since obviously they can. Hold on a sec. I swear my family always knows when to call me at like the absolute worst times, like right at 2:05. There's no way. Like right at 2:05? Come on. Okay, that wasn't a higher high, but it's definitely a higher close. So that can still kind of suffice this. Like I said, they didn't quite fully break right here, so I figured we'd probably have like a 1 point reduction, and that's okay because the window is between 2:05 to like that 2:15 period. So where's that 157? Do you see this? It's like roughly like a point, just under a point and a half. And I feel like that's probably why they kind of stalled here. Do you see that? It was the exact same reduction off what they didn't do back here. Okay? Because I would have preferred that they... Where is the 57? Yeah, right here. I would have preferred that they tested 7-1 back here. So same sort of idea. And that's likely why they stalled and didn't trigger 7-5 off that high break, but we still have some time. I'm just being very, very, very cautious because, again, if they want to stall range or something, this would make sense that it would be the time that they would do it at. So that was exactly 7-5, and that was all because of what they did here. There was a slight reduction of like a point, okay? Mid-range in here would be around 209, I think. Let me see. The highest probabilities was in here, so off 13. So mid-range would be right in here, I think. This is the 4th minute, right? Between here. It's right around here. 09, 10. These are the mid-range bars. So if they can start breaking at least now, then we have odds of still getting those 73, 78, 81, 83 during these intervals, okay? 209 midpoint. Come on, market. I should be measuring off here, but the 5-minute mid-bar would be 210. So 209, 210 are kind of the median points here of our calculated periods, okay? So basically the 50% time interval. At that point, that becomes very, 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 very important that they try testing 7-5. Okay? 7-5 is also 44-point range off open. What do you guys think? This is so close. I feel like it's gonna do it. $75.25 is the actual trigger. I know it's stupid, but that's what breaking. Testing highs is not going to break it. It's that 2.5, and there it is. That's right on that 50% time interval here. So this can keep those odds in play during these next few minutes. I would say that there's potential volatility considering that slight delay and tiny, tiny, tiny reduction in range. We're basically looking for 73, 78, 73, 79, 50 retests. These are our bigger targets on the session today. And like I said, if they can break these areas at this point in time, this was my highest odd for high of day breaks, okay, that I analyzed earlier. They can keep this durational basically till end of session today. So that would give us very, very, very good odds of getting into yet another zone, which I know sounds crazy, but this was all on the Sunday report. Like 7,400 seemed crazy when I said it 3 weeks ago, but now it's not so crazy. Like now it's not so crazy anymore. Like this is pretty insane that they actually are doing this. 2 days also now in its 11th bar, I think we said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh no, 12th. And this 13th bar is usually when markets decide if they want to continue exhausting or expanding. That's going to be between the 8th and 12th, okay? So this is basically the period for this to kind of just keep making a run for it. And this getting to a new zone ahead of the 8th is going to do what? What is this going to do? If they get to a new zone before the 8th, okay, and we have a potential exhaustion expansion window here, if they trigger 7388, what could that do for us? In theory, if they did that by the 7th, okay, they don't necessarily have to do it today. The period right now is 6th, 7th. What could that potentially mean? Thanks, Brendan. No, that usually when you trigger that, it can give you that, it's the 100-point theory, so you can get yet another 100 points. Okay. Which sounds insane, but that's what those ratios actually end up equating to anyway when we looked at them. Because what they're doing right now, long story short, this is not the best time to go over this, but because remember how I said they're working with like those expansion ratios of like 461, okay, 462. When you start breaking off such a high level of range, okay, which is this, basically, do you see this? And that's where they ended up holding the line yesterday. Like, long story short, especially off like the 430s. Okay, these are the 430s. I don't know if you guys can see this. Okay, if we look at it from here to here, okay, this would be the 70s again. This is probably going to be close to our 08, 09 break. Okay. The only thing that really gets left for them to do at these points is they'd have to keep breaking off these ranges. And like these areas are linked to, do you see like the 73, 24, 26? Do you see what I'm saying? Like these areas here, look, the 430, these are linked to them basically holding the line. They're basically breaking range from April 8th and 9th, which these were very, very important flip dates. And the difference between the 8th and 9th is once you break that, look at the 13th. There's not much range ahead of that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like when you start getting range breaks like this, like there really isn't much range ahead of that. Look at this. This is exactly 432 points. Okay, that's not a coincidence. That's actually insanely accurate for range, okay? So, and this is off a open ratio, okay? Do you see what I mean? Open to close, open to close. High to high, okay? That's a high. Open to close. Do you see that? Open to close. That's literally almost exact open close ratios, okay? Look. Look. 431. 432. 430. Do you think that's not a coincidence? These are core ratios. That's actually insane, okay? So these were very, 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 very calculated spots, basically. Okay? So what's left for them to do? Just, this is the most dumbed down way I can explain this. There's not really anything left for them to do. What's left for them to do? At this point, where do you have left to break off of? Especially if you're holding 06, which clearly they're doing that. Yes, and off the high ratios, right? Like there's not really anything left for them to do. So if they can hold these 20s, which clearly they're holding them, okay? That's why I said like holding those 20s is insane, because that means that they want to digest beneath the 430 ratios. Does that make sense? Guys, this is like the easiest way I can try explaining this like in like 2 minutes. Okay, they want to digest the basically 7300 to 7320 gets digested, okay? And then what happens to the rest? It gets swept, okay? And that's exactly what they're doing, because now at this point, your only ratios are 460s, okay? Which is why we had some odds of like maybe stalling the 5-1, 5-2, but you're not left with anything until you break off the highs. Do you see what I'm saying? And that is why you can get into a new zone. Look, there's nothing in between. You would automatically trigger those 463, 461, 463 point ratios, okay? That's the easiest way I can try explaining this. Does that make sense? You guys, like this is, it's a huge break, I know, but like from price ratio, like these are huge areas for us to be triggering here. 461 and 62 point intervals being triggered here. This is huge. This is what basically could set the market up for yet another, I know it sounds insane, but another 400 points, okay? And when we have expansion odds like this, like typically you can see them kind of run things for a period of up to an entire quarter. And we're working right now with what? Annual flag breaks. Okay, so on an annual flag break, we're in the third bar. We're in the fourth bar, sorry. So this whole year could basically be an expansion. On an 11-month scenario, this is the third bar. That doesn't flip till December. On a 10-month scenario, this has kind of just been flagging. That doesn't really flip. And we kind of started having like bars on a flag basis, even off like a 5-month, that runs till June. This is when I was saying like they could basically run this till end of Q2 and basically until end of the year, right? There could be a small tiny period where they decide that they want to continue, but you see this? This is a really good example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th bar expanded, 8, 9, 10 exhausted, 11th bar. Okay, this doesn't flip until July. Right now, we're basically in that same sort of scenario. Does that make sense? And this is all based on that theory that we basically were running all the way through. And that would basically negate the odds of a massive star reversal by end of June if they just kept running this, right? Because if they don't from here, then they can make a star reversal. This is probably the one bearish pattern that's showing up here if they don't continue. But do you see how they could just take it and run with it? And when you get into another zone, the crazy thing is my theory that I made up is usually when you trigger those 8 areas, 90 areas, you could get another 100 points. So this equals plus 100. Does that make sense? The actual ratios are 107, 115, 110, okay? When you're measuring those by 2, that's where you get your 210, 214, 230s. Okay, when you double those in range, that's where you get 410, 430, 460. Do you get what I'm saying, you guys? These are core to core breaks. These are very rare, okay? But when the market's doing this, these are the highest odds of expansion, okay? And I've gone over this a few times, but look at the ranges on the 31st, 214, 230. That's not a coincidence, okay? That's because you're basically getting core to core breaks on this. When they held a 214, 212 point range. Do you see that? And look at how they kept expanding this. Again, 230 points, 212 points. So it depends on what way works best for you. This is where they struggled a bit when they started struggling in here. And you can see the struggle. Do you see it? Off the 181. 181 was the minimum range. That was between 176, 207, off highs, 198. Okay? 182. So back in here, they couldn't really get a 182 point break. They struggled a tiny bit, and between that 198, and then they started stalling a tiny bit around that 210, 214. Okay, which are these ranges here off the 31st open close, until you finally got an open close ratio, which is very important. Okay, of like at least that 214 to 182 points, which would have been right here. Okay, this is when you started to push, but then you couldn't break over 214. Then you did. Do you see it? Look, these are the 220, 224, 230, 240 breaks. Look. And this is what's allowing that expansion. So, and I haven't even really looked at this, but I would bet anything that they're probably hitting like 150 point ratios here. And yeah, basically, long story short, that's what could, like on these 220, 215 point holds, this is essentially what could allow for, we could probably work with this before 400 points, but do you see what I mean? Do you guys see that? Like in theory, even if they did like the 185, the 198, okay, the 205, 214, like off those ratios, you're still going to get around these 74, 20s, 30s, 40s. The really, really big range break would be basically expanding off April 13th. April 13th was a very important flip date, right? The 13th and 14th, these were the days that expanded us. Why? Because they were 1, 2, 3, 4. They were the fourth bar periods. Do you get what I'm saying, you guys? That kept us going. This is what can keep you going for another durational trend, which is basically what they did. And that's kind of the range that we're hitting now, is like off of here. So yes, if they break this area here, which they already are, okay, and testing it. Do you see what I mean? Do you see this? The 460s? Are these areas huge? Just look at the PA. Like, this is insanely calculated. That's why I said there's nothing in between. On a wider basis, there's literally nothing in between. It's, yes, there's going to be some overhead at 6.6, 7.1. Okay, but these are the big, big, big spots. It's trying to get to another zone. Does that make sense, you guys? Like, just from looking at this on a wide basis. And then if we measure off our 14th flip day, which was our expansion period. Okay, this is where things would get really interesting, because that's where they could see obviously much wider core expansions, right? And even off like a minimal range, let's say off our April 15th lows. I'm not using 346 recently, but you know, these would be like the 370s, 380s, but same sort of idea. 412, 420, 426. Do you guys understand this concept? I really want you guys to see this without me having to be like this. When we first broke, remember I said from low to high, we started low to low, low to close. They did around 413, 475, 427, sorry. We could use a very, very, very similar type of range, okay, if we're measuring off these, and that's what gets us basically our core areas in the 20s, okay? Does that make sense? And that would be 100 points basically off today's open. 100 points off of today's open is the exact same thing as a 426 point break. Okay? Is also a 426.75 point break off April 14th. And you have to admit that that's insane. Okay? And I've said before that you could do open close ratios if you want and keep measuring like that if you wanted to. You can kind of see where this was important that they had to sustain, especially when you're looking at it from like the 413 ratios off a low. So you see like there's like slight breaches here. That's okay, because off a low ratio, okay, you could afford 413. Do you see that, you guys? Like that's pretty insane if you think about it. And right now the candle that we're breaking off of is the 13th. This is the candle we're breaking off of. This is linked to today. These ranges. Do you see that? Especially off the 4th, 5th, 6th. They basically held a 413 point ratio. 413 points held by the 5th of April 13th or April 9th, whatever date that was, 13th, from March 31st. Okay, and that's basically what allowed this continuation to occur. Okay? And I didn't really measure this, but I wonder, I didn't really measure it like this, but I feel like maybe this might make it more accurate. Yeah, that does. Like if you did 413 off the close here, or open, I didn't do this, but I feel like this would probably make it more accurate. So 6,798, 6,798. And then this, is that right? 98.75, 98.75. So this area here, okay. And then the 430, that's crazy, is literally this area here. These are the exact open close low ratios of 413 and 426 to 430 points. That's crazy, especially off the 5th and 6th. So off that exact measured range. This isn't measuring off the actual open close. This is off the actual range, okay? Which should be in actuality the range here. And you could see back here first they kind of were stalling like the 460s until they came back and cleared it. And I did kind of measure like this before too, just to kind of see off the higher low off April 2nd. Okay, and that worked out pretty well because like that kind of used like the 420 to 430 point ratios. And that would make sense why they probably really had to hold 5.6, 5.7 today to keep this going. Look. Do you see that, you guys? That's insane. So like solid holds of the 73.20s this morning. And then here they held those 57, 56. It's kind of closer to 5.6. And that's what keeps these 80s in play. Isn't that just brilliant? Like that is actually crazy. Accurate and insane. If you want to go back and study anything, you could definitely study this. So if we did 460 point ratios here, like I'm just manually measuring at this point, just to kind of see what it would allow for. These could be the extensions, like 7,394, 95. Okay, these areas here. So, and then you can see like the 20s. These are probably more calculated, I would say. So off a more calculated approach, there's some overhead around 7394 area. That's like the 429 to 430-ish point range. And then this would be the 7,425 to 27 is basically the 461 point ratios. That's off a more calculated approach, okay, off the low range from April 2nd, okay? That's manually calculating that, by the way. And another way of looking at that is that's basically from real time today, that's 100 points off lows, right? If they did something like that from here, from real time lows, that's, and these are core ratios now. That's a core ratio here too. So another way of looking at this on a micro view, core ratios are usually 52, 55, 58. So these are now hitting those 55 to 56 point ratios. And if they extend this, these are probably 66. These are probably the 70s. And I would bet anything that these areas here are the 103. Yeah, they are. That is insane. That's the 103, 107, 115 in those 40s. Okay. From weekly open this week, which was that 72.60, that 72.76 area. These are also now hitting core ratios. I know this is going to go over a lot of your heads. I really just want you guys to try understanding this. That's a core ratio here, okay? So there's lots of core ratios off weekly open. We're now hitting 103, 107, 110, 115 points, okay? So you could imagine that these spots here would be huge. And they all align with zone breaks in the 73, 80s, and 90s. Okay, that's the last session you guys are going to get on this expansion break, okay? Especially in real time, because that is just, it's such a crazy break, and like the times that they broke this at is insane. 73, 78, 75 tested at exactly 215, 216. These were the odds. and that 73.79.50. Again, they did the same thing they did here. 73.79.50 was a bit more calculated. They did the exact same thing where they had that 1.25 range reduction that they did earlier, and that could kind of be a common theme, but these are all very, 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 very calculated spots. So I don't really know what more to add other than that, especially around this 90, 92, and 94. This area here. This area is extremely calculated. You could for sure take some off in this range. I didn't really have too many odds during this period here for, like, this was the most important period for a break of highs and a break of 7.5 and a test of 7.8, 7.9. There was a tiny stall and again a 1 minute delay. They did break it, but 217 was, I think, a minute late, and that's exactly what happened back here off 7.1. These were the wider ranges off 454 minute intervals around 243, 44, 45. This is kind of like the next important point. So if they're going to keep breaking highs, then it probably is going to occur around here. I am pretty confident that we could enter the zone today, you guys. So 73.88, 73.90, I still think are in play. 74.20s I feel like is kind of pushing it, but obviously anything is possible. How did you guys like that rundown? Give me some feedback while I make some coffee, because I don't know who's new here and who's not, but if you want to keep using those ratios, I'm kind of almost giving you like the cheat code, because it's in line with my theory, right? I've made up this theory that core ratios break on these intervals, right? And now we're actually seeing it happen from a time and price perspective. And like we had flip dates on the 31st and on the 8th and on the 13th and on the 6th. So this is one of the more important flip dates that we have for the week along with the 8th. So if they can trigger that zone today, then they can literally get to 64.20s and 40s this week, which I know sounds insane because we don't even have any catalyst to get us there. It's just moving. And I laughed yesterday because someone said that there's no volume for the week along with the 8th. So no volume is pretty funny because it's not that you don't need volume. It's just that sometimes when there isn't any force to push it down, it'll just keep ramping up. Okay, so it's a really strange way of looking at the market, but I honestly, these were my targets for 2026 anyway, and I knew that the first half of Q1 into 2026 was going to be the hardest period for the market. And I knew that since 2023, okay? So I analyzed this period back like 3 years ago. This is the period in the market on a 3-year cycle that could expand us. You don't even want to know my expansion scenarios over the next 3 years because we looked at like basically getting to 10,000, which I know sounds crazy, but I have some video analysis on that for anyone that's interested in watching those. I can send them later, but these were the odds for the first half of 2026 is that they could trigger these areas here, and the bigger targets are around the 77,700s, but again, that's basically adding another 430, 460 points from here. Really good structure breaks coming in right here. I really, really, really hope you guys are taking advantage of this. I didn't see any reason to sell. Actually, I bought at 5.8 for tomorrow, and I'm still holding my calls for today. I had bought some calls yesterday when we had that really good sustainment back in here. This looks insane. But when they sustained the channel yesterday, I figured that this was a very good key break off 6.4 and 7.1. And this morning I was a little bit slower just because they kind of moved quick, but I figured when they held the 20s here, getting an entry off, I don't think I had my first entry this morning. I didn't get filled at the open. I got filled around 3.8. I wanted to see if they'd base off 3.8 and 4.4. So this is where I entered calls for today here, aside from the ones that I had yesterday for that 6.6 retest. And then this was my second entry, but these ones I did for tomorrow. Okay. I think I'm just gonna hold them, to be honest with you, because if there's a any odd that we can get to 64.20s tomorrow, then I might just hold those into tomorrow. But we don't get breaks like this often, okay? So when you do, you have to just take advantage, okay? You just have to do it, okay? And I know my ladder seemed crazy when I put like 7,388 immediately to 7,421, but they're really, and you just saw it. I probably should have put the 7,382 to 7,384 because that is a very calculated area here. And this is the exact spot we want to see volume come in. But there wasn't really anything in between when looking at it on a much broader perspective. These are the odds, guys, for entering zone as early as 243, 245, 246. Pretty insane, honestly, if you ask me. I really, really, really hope you guys caught the majority of this move. Okay, this is, we don't, like I said, these are mass expansion breaks, like 420 plus point intervals, okay? We don't usually have those happen. The last time we had this happen was back in, I want to say October. Last year we did expand. Remember, I said we broke 346 point intervals and started working off 375, 380, 410, 420. And this is them basically putting us back in that same realm. If you want to take some off here, you can. I'm basically waiting to see what they do off my bigger intervals here around this period, especially since conditions were met. I am aware that they were a minute late though, so, and there's a tiny reduction. It's not much, but that's what's causing some of the stalls and delays here. Apple kind of got stuck a little bit from a zone-based theory. I think I sent you guys this, but for those that want to use this template, you can. I did add all the way up here today. This would probably mean that usually when ES is at core ranges here, SPX is probably just breaking out of the channel. So this was like a nice channel break for SPX. So you can think of like if ES tags the zone or like those 7390s, SPX is going to tag core ratios around 7.1, 7.2. Okay, you can essentially kind of use the same sort of logic there. I want to update everything, but I can only be in so many places at once, so I don't know. I haven't really put any updates on that Substack thread, but I feel like it was honestly as straightforward as it gets. And I said it early this morning that core areas are in play. 7383 triggered. I made that all free actually this week too for access. I don't think that thread is locked. I'm pretty sure it's not. And I did forget to turn on the bot, unfortunately, but so some slight delays here. It's crazy too because SPY calls for tomorrow are up 1,500% off yesterday. It's close. it's pretty wild too, because a vast majority of, not people that I've taught or anything, just like people that were just kind of speculating, I guess. Like, I don't know. Every single person was looking at 6,900, I swear, for the last 2 to 3 weeks. And I know I was a bit aggressive on being against that, especially on those structural holds of like this area here. Like us holding 7206 was insanely calculated. But even back here, when they held 7122, 32, remember? And I said that if they bring this back, then, and now you understand why, because they also broke it back over that 214, 230 point ratio, right? But this part here, I have never seen as many bears or interaction with people that were thinking that they were going to drop this down to 6900s here. Every single person I talked to that was just I don't know these people, just like random people that were asking questions, was had the same exact thesis here in this area here. Okay? So I don't know if how some of you guys were looking at the market, especially some of you that are not in Discord, Substack, whatever, don't really understand my style of trading. This would be a really, really good session to go back and rewatch and review, because these aren't trades that you want to miss. The market doesn't always give us really good opportunities like this. All right, so these would be some pretty big spots here. 78, 73, 83, 75. I know that's calculated off those wider ranges, like the 420, 430, 460, but this was also a big spot that I looked at this morning. Trying to go back to this morning to find those. These areas here, I sent these literally off the open this morning, but that spot in specific, where is it? Oh, and by the way, these were also the 34 point interval. I'm not going to go over this right now, but whoever wants to go and review whatever I say. These were basically markets trying to hold off 34, 66 point intervals, which was at 7,357, 61, 65, which is where they back tested earlier. We also saw how that was important on those wider intervals, but on an intraday basis, this is how it was correlated. And sustaining those areas basically kept those 44, 88 point ranges in play. And this is what I found pretty interesting, because off lows, off session open and close and open, that was where the 7,375 overhead was, along with that 7,371, which is why that was linked to lows. So this was linked to lows, okay? Linked to lows. So breaking that is what avoided basically getting back to lows, okay? That's like the best way I can explain that, off that 3-1, off that 73.27 to 7-1. Breaking 7-5 keeps you at play of getting basically a break from session close, okay? That's session close versus session open, okay? So write that down. Session close versus session open, okay? So these areas here basically imply what? If I were to look at it like this, session close versus session open. Okay, session close. We already hit an 88, 89 point ratio, correct? I haven't measured that yet off of session open, okay? So I haven't looked at that yet. Does that make sense? And that is why you could get these types of breaks to 88. Okay, so session open, I never looked at yet. That was this break right here. Okay, off session lows, we're already kind of just sitting right now in this range. That's why now you probably want to hold these areas. And then off of yesterday's session highs, that's where if they were to push and expand, you could get like the 92, 91, so on and so forth. Anyway, it's going to be around our 7304, 7305, 7309. Like those areas expanding are obviously the big spots, but this is a very, very, very heavy area for the market in this spot in here, okay? And specifically off these time intervals in here too. Okay, let me reset this. And these are also some important time frames at this point, so they're already starting to reduce range just a little bit. And you can see it like right off the 39, 80, 82. I think these were, hold on, I'm missing something in here. These are the 338, 339, okay, off those morning lows. I don't know if you guys can see those. I did measure this, which links to this, okay, but I didn't mark the 466 and 464. I think these are, I think I marked them, but I didn't write what they were. Oops. It's like roughly 4, I think that's what this was. I just didn't mark that. This is 466. It's probably the cutoff to try coming back and retracing this, okay? So luckily enough, even though the market had some odds here, I think this period, because I did say that these were linked to lows, they're trying to come back and sustain, okay? So as long as they can kind of keep these thresholds off, oh, these are the parts that are linked to lows, which are linked to those highs of 6.6. So if they can keep that basically sustaining above 7.5, 7.8, I would say. That's what could keep it in play for duration of the session. Does that make sense, you guys? Like this would be until literally end of day. Okay, 464, 466 minute intervals are right until end of session today, especially off these very, very calculated frames. Okay, so from right in here. Okay. And these are off the 73.31, 73.26. These odds for real time actually run after the bell, like the 9:30 odds. But these ones here are what are linked to basically 4 o'clock, 4:04, 4:05. That's this window here. Poet's getting a nice structure break over that 986, you guys. So I would say that during this window here, probably important that market tries to sustain in here. This is definitely enough, by the way, to be considered a max range if they want to stall 8.3. But I would say if they can hold off 7.1, ideally over 7.5, 7.6, I think that would be better, since they did technically break a little bit above 8.3. So let's see. There's that 1.25 again. I would say that they could still have some odds of trying to bring this back around. Ideally during this window though, you probably don't really want to delay that, at least to get it back in here, to keep it in play for end of session today. Okay, I'm gonna take a very quick break, you guys. I haven't had really any water or coffee or anything. I'll be right back. Do you guys want the screen on or off? I don't really care. Poet, I did take some longs on that. I sent it earlier. I don't know if anyone did this one with me. Poet breaking. And I did say that the 906, 916 to 920 were some good spots. I didn't capture that low. I caught it right in here, but I like that it was consolidating over basically our previous overheads. And it did trigger that 1095 in pre-market. It stalled just beneath it. That's kind of the bigger trigger on this. So it is worth at least, even if it was a small trade, just to kind of see if they'd bring it back. Tesla made it right back over 385 to our 400 spot. 402, 401. I don't have the 401 mark. These are very calculated areas on Tesla on the 32, 33 point intervals. This one usually works in around 33, 34 points. 32, 33 points. I'm not sure how much this is right now, but it's probably hitting around 17 of it here. So this is half of Tesla's usual range, because Tesla usually can trigger. So if you get at least half that range, you can almost always assume that you'll get 34 points. Where do they open today? It's usually around 31 to 34 points. I think 31.85 or something is like the exact range, but okay, so you could maybe assume that Tesla on these kinds of breaks, 15, that this makes more sense, okay, is likely to get to that 416 max range would be around here. 416, 418, 420. Okay. Because that's Tesla basically moving in those 31 to 34 point intervals. Right now it's basically doing about half that range. 401, 402 are huge. These are my expansion targets. Set alerts on Tesla. 401, 402 on Tesla are huge. That's what could trigger, is what could trigger 417 to 423 basically, okay? On Tesla. I don't know who trades Tesla in here, but that's a big spot for me, so okay, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. What did I miss? Did we break? Did we break? Oh, wow. Where do they trigger? 8-7? So they're right into the zone. We're right. Oh my god. Wait. These were the odds. And this was during their 331, 339 intervals. That is insane. Okay, so this keeps us in play, guys, until end of session today then, because this was a calculated time. I ate so fast. Now I feel like puking. It's not quite 8-8 though. 8-8 is the bigger trigger, but again, they're likely doing that because of that 1.25 offset that we talked about, right? So I'm not surprised. And those slight delays, right? This is still good. I can't believe they're actually doing it, you guys. That's insane. This is off 9:30. This would be off 9:31. In this period here, basically. This. See if they negate. Did you guys hold with me? This could be the minute delay because of that 1 point reduction I mentioned earlier, so that's probably here. This is probably that minute delay. Did you guys hold through this period? I went in 8, which is probably the worst thing I could have done, but I felt pretty confident that they would do it when I saw them retrace back over 7-9 right here. Right here. Right before I left. Okay, so these were the secondary periods here. Off like the 354, 327. But basically this just would go into close now. I think we said the 370 minutes would be the extensions. Do you guys see these late breaks? Look, and these were probably close to like the 340, 330, but at this point in time, I don't even think timing matters because this is now in play for end of day. There's the minute delay, guys. 73.88 breaking here. 73.88 is a zone entry. 8.50 is the full 88-point break off highs. 73.90s are the heavy area beneath 74.07.05, whatever. I don't know why it deleted them again, but up in here, close to like 9.1, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5. These are much wider ranges, but they're also really big intervals even on the intraday session today. From core ratios off open, we'd be hitting them here. So these are roughly like those 57, 58. Core ratios off of weekly open, which are obviously very important. So off of weekly lows, which is our 7199, we're already hitting 188 point metric, by the way. So remember how I said here on the 31st, like it's close to like 214, 230, 182, 198. So they're kind of hitting within those 182, 198 ranges here. If you want to do that off weekly lows, it would be around those 7390s. If we hit like that 214 range off weekly lows, it's going to be around the 7413. And then if we hit max range, which is the 230, that's 7429. That's off weekly lows. If we broke off weekly open and these structural open close off the 4th, so 7420s, that's where we could get the channel. But for now, let's just focus on this, and you could have like those 173 point ratios here too. So 73, 98, 99 has a lot of confluence too. Yes, they can. We have high odds. And off weekly open, these are now hitting core ratios. These are the 110, 112, 115 off weekly open. Unless they do like the reductions, but these are the core ranges off weekly open. So 115 points off weekly open is 73.91.25. I would write that down. Write this down. This is my crazy chart that I don't have to share with anyone, so. Okay, and I noticed in the past that they broke 117 roughly. I don't know if you guys remember that. So that's why there's also some confluence around that 94. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I did mention that in the past, that there were some breaks of like roughly this. Okay, do you remember this? Especially off highs, lows, open, close. These were 107, 110, 128 to 107, 106, 127. Strikerman, I think you just have an issue with your mic. I think that's a you problem. But this here is kind of like these like mid intervals here basically. So, and that was off of our April 17th. So I feel like they're basically doing the same thing here. So if they get these structure breaks, that's when they can start breaking 128, 132 points off weekly open. Okay? I'm just going to mark these. What is this? This is 130. These areas here, guys, are 130, 128 to 132 points off weekly open. Okay? Like around the 74.08.06. Off weekly close, where we already broke the 107 areas back here. So another way of looking at this is where they held this afternoon was those 107 point ratios off last week's close. Okay, so this hold right here was a core hold off last week's close, which is what's giving us those odds of core breaks off this week's open. Okay. Which is basically where we're at, 73, 87, 88, 91. Okay. And normally when you get extensions above and beyond that, that's obviously when you get like your 132, 133. That's why they were stalling the 73.80 a lot. 173 points from here, which is, I know we're not using 173 points right now, but I mean, it's always good to use our 346 point intervals. That's at 74.21. So this is also pretty crazy because from last week's close, 173 points is also, I just want to mark as much confluence as I can, okay? 173 points from last week's close. 173 points from this week's close or open would be 74.50 basically. Even though we're not using these ratios, I'm just telling you guys what they are, okay? And this is where we'd hit those like 180s, 190s, 214s. If we hit a 214 point ratio off of this week's open, you guys, we would basically get into another zone. Okay? So doubled core ratios get us to yet another zone, which is how this whole trend started in the first place. Don't forget. Okay? 214, 230. If they expand off weekly open, 214 is 7,488, 7,490. Off of the 30 range, it would probably be close to 7,500. Yeah, 7,505 area. Which is insane. This area here is like the 230 points off weekly open, which is also 100 points off where they held lows. 230 points off weekly open. Okay. You guys are actually lucky I'm doing a stream on a day like this. I don't like streaming on big days like this because obviously it's distracting for me, but it's good to see like what the big spots are. So this area has a lot of confluence. I could be off with my ranges, but they're very close to being off these areas here, okay? This area here, I don't have it marked, but this was off the 430, 460 August 13th intervals. I'm pretty sure. I have to double check that, but I'm like 99% sure that that's what that was off there. So that would be like when they had this structure break, okay, and then we basically expanded above and beyond that. I'm pretty sure that's where this came from. That was off the hold, and then this was off the 466, 466. Yes, okay, so that's where that comes from, okay? Do you see that? These areas here, these are the 460, 66, 64 point ranges. So these spots are very huge. And especially when we start measuring basically off of here, okay? Off of here. Do you see it? Off of here. So this was them again holding basically 466. Do you see that this morning? That's a 466 hold here. 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 That's where today's... So basically where they opened today was off of max range. This was a max range open. Okay? Off of these spots right here. 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 This is our 3-7 spot. Okay. Here. This is our 849 break. And basically we had nothing beneath this. This is tiny bit lower, I think closer to like here. Okay, so basically holding this area here implied that there's not really anything above until we get these structure breaks here. Okay, so this is, I'm going to send you guys this as one chart because I feel like then you guys will have a better idea, but does that make sense? So that's where these ranges are coming into play. This is more than enough to be considered some max range for the session today. But just for those that obviously want to track this a little bit better, okay, that's where you have these areas come in. Okay? And if you look at it on like a smaller time frame, you'll be able to see the trade in real time. Do you see it? This is the real time trade. Holds off those 73.20s. Okay, structure breaks off 3736. Okay, sustainment over 4849. No break back beneath 5354. Okay, this is what keeps you in play for 73.91, 94. 73.91, 94, guys, is huge. I would say that this is a huge area here. If you're holding dailies, you might want to look to cover some here. If they take out this range, this is the tough part, because if they take out this range, okay, then the thing is that's where they could get those mass pushes. But then you would look for like the 4, we'd have to make sure that it's not aligned and it's higher than like the 413. Do you see that? 426, which is the 3-1, 430s. But long story short, that's what could basically net this to the 74.50s basically. Okay, I do think that there could be some overhead in between 74.60 and 17. And specifically around here, like 74.05, 08. So it's up to you guys. If you want to hold, you can. There's obviously a lot of potential overhead right in between here, but this is kind of the theme if they were to keep this going. Okay. And these are not exact ranges, I'm just giving you guys like an idea. Okay. Let me focus on my positions, because these are pretty big spots. Does that help you guys understand why these areas are huge? Especially off these time intervals here. So them testing these at this point is actually pretty important. I don't know why it keeps deleting this. 8,950 should be marked on here. This should be marked on here. Okay. This was a 354 interval, which so far is high of day. That's these were the very, very, very late odds that extend till close basically. Okay. I always watch 354, 55, so I'm gonna mark them anyway, even though they weren't really calculated, but we have odds until close. You guys think they'll give us 64.20s today? Could you imagine that? And if you guys are paying attention, are you now noticing, like, let me just delete this so you guys can see. Are you guys noticing the 1 to 1.25 offsets now? Like every single time? Do you guys see it? If you guys are paying attention? Have you seen that? Look at that negation stick. 73.88.50 retraced here, keeping this back in play. Like I said, I didn't really put any flips in here because I figured these are probably like the 370, so there's probably some odds around like imbalance prints between 330, 31, 36. Like this is basically just a continuation play. So it's more of like the calculated times that I want to watch to see what price points they triggers. Like 73, 89, 88 triggering here is crucial, because if they can get these areas here, okay, then we have odds to basically get to these areas in here. And these are very big spots. These are not exact price targets, by the way. I'm obviously trying to multitask here, but Apple's still stuck. Tesla just slightly broke. There's literally no simple way of answering that. I went over it this morning with the Discord and then gave them an assignment because I basically gave them a very good head start, and I don't usually share that stuff. And literally no one did it. But anyway. Well, one person did it, but not using my logic. It's very complex. It's the easiest way I can say that. I was using it off of times I calculated yesterday off certain price points. So that's the issue with timing, is like people just think that they could just apply things on here, but that's not how it works. Okay? It's based on price and time. Okay? So like those price like I had these marked last night. Before last night. Okay? So and look at what they triggered last night. Okay? So I know that these are accurate. Okay? This is what I timed yesterday. Our 212, 213, 216, 221 flips. You guys remember from yesterday's session? That was the time of day to trigger my 72.95.50 calculated spot. The price has to align with the time. Otherwise, it's not valid. So how am I supposed to explain that, I guess, in a simplified way? It's very hard. Does that make sense? Like, that's a very hard thing to explain. So these points in time, I know that I have to trigger 7,383.75. Okay, I know I have to, this is a very crucial point to try triggering 8.8, 8.9 to keep these odds in play. Yeah, but the price comes from math. That price is math based. Did you get that? What I mean? So that's what makes it a little bit complex. It's very hard to align exact price at exact time. Certain price points would be linked to that. Like there's certain time intervals that I jotted down that would be linked to like a low range. No, this is just specific to today. Okay, so that kind of rolled over from yesterday, I guess you could say, because the 5th and 6th are part of the same schedule, if that makes sense, because they're within like the same multi-flips. How am I supposed to, I don't know how to explain that, but basically like from Okay, this is the 464. Do you see that? They avoided basically breaking down. You see how I marked it in red? You see that negation here? To basically break to my 7309, 7309, 06, 05. These are my calculated spots. Do you see what they did? I marked these yesterday morning. Okay, so for overnight. They basically held 05, 09 here, then cleared it. Do you see that? To 7327, 29. Those are my calculated spots. Okay, 37, 38. We just went over why those were calculated, but so I know that that period is valid. And this avoided basically a structural breakdown back beneath 7305. And like a way of understanding, like I guess like what direction it could have went, like is obviously based on like the preconditions that were set, but that was a 55-point break, which I would bet anything would probably take us back to like those prior intraday session like low ranges from yesterday. It's the same sort of idea. Okay, where's yesterday's session in real time? And even like off here, okay, so like 31-point break. Do you see what I mean? That would have probably broken our structures around 70, 80. Okay. I think these were the real-time holds yesterday around 6-1, 6-2. And mainly specific to like this period. Do you see that? Like this would be specific to this period. Okay, but that's how you could have essentially gotten retest of these areas here, which would have obviously ruined your structure, right, from yesterday. So on a max range basis, probably closer to like 50 to 60 points. Okay, do you see how this would have taken you back to our square one, which was what I put down on on that cheat sheet, like the 7244, 46, like do you see what I'm saying? Like these areas here, that's what would have probably triggered the 7244 reset. Okay? And these were very crucial times for that to be avoided. And I would bet anything, I haven't even looked at this yet, but I would bet anything that this current range off that is probably linked back to weekly lows. It's likely literally almost the exact same range. Let's take a look and see. 7220, that was our structural hold. Okay, and then the 14. That would have taken out weekly lows. Do you see that? So I know for a fact that that's what these areas are correlated with. Look, this is off that break. Especially if I measure it off of 09, 11, because those are our calculated spots. Okay, this is the 3-2 hold here. Okay, and then off of, I'm just going to mark our 09, because the thing is these were our calculated spots anyway, so it's not, you could use 04 because that's where they closed, but like 73, 05, 09 were spots I calculated from literally weeks back. But do you see how that would have triggered a much bigger short back to basically these spots here? It's the same sort of logic that you could use if we apply it from here. That's the 20. Do you see that? That's off 70. That's basically where we closed or opened. And then off of 9.5, which is where we closed, that would have been around that 16. If we used a similar logic here, okay, that would trigger that 10 spot. So that's where like the 70 to 10, 06, like that's where these ranges would get triggered. And then off of this very, very calculated area right here, okay, which was the 7-9, which is what we did not want to break. Do you see how that could have triggered a retest of lows? Like basically back in here. So I know, so think about it this way. That's how you can understand if this is a max ratio. Does that make sense? And because that would trigger your weekly lows. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, and this is off a very, very calculated spot. And usually when I look at these things anyway, like I'm using core ratios. So core ratios would be this. Where's my core ratios? This. Okay, so think about it like that. So off our structure break, which is our 7309, 7308, 7310, whatever, 7305, we're already breaking 78 points. So at this point, there's not really anything left for us to do until this. Does that make sense? Like this is, it's obviously kind of complex, but, and that's off the structure break. So if you're looking at this right here, like once they cleared 09, they've already broken 78, 79 points here. Do you see that? If we use the actual stick break, that's 78 points. So that's another way of concluding that obviously 73.90 is huge, right? Because if they clear this, then that's what we could get. That's how we could get like the 110, 117. Do you get what I'm saying? That's how you'd get like an expansion case scenario. And if they did the same thing on downside, which would have been the case because that would have broken the 79, 78 point ratios, then you could have gone back to 71, 72, 71, 75, 71, 76. Do you get what I'm saying? Which essentially just takes you right back to what if you took it right back here. Right? Kind of takes you right back into this range in here. That's what sets up that bigger risk if, you know, 132 points. 132 points would get you back to here. Do you see it? 128, 129, 130. That gets you back to your 71.50s. So the range has to be exact. Does that make sense? On both ends. You can't just have like one end trigger and then not have it be net equal on the other side, I guess, if that makes sense. But from like a time perspective, I just had these marked from yesterday, and I figured that if market keeps moving in, this is the 354 right here, if market keeps moving in these types of ranges, that's why this time of day was pretty important. I mainly measured this point though off the 6-6 break because that was my calculated price point, and that's what's linked to these time intervals here. Do you see that? So these time intervals would be basically linked with triggering those spots. If I do it off the low, which is what I did here, like off that structural low, then I would probably look at this range in here. Okay, and that was my 73, 26, 27, whatever those lows were. Okay, do you see that? That's why this could stay in play till duration of end of session today. Look, this is 456 to 466 minutes. Okay, and these run right into the last 10 minutes of the close. Could you imagine if they ramp us to 64.20s the last 10 minutes? That would be insane. But I don't want to say that and then have like someone gamble or something. But technically speaking, if they take out 73.91 to 94, then there isn't too much of a barrier in between there. But this is obviously enough range to be considered like a max range scenario for the session today. And then we have some odds for like after the close, like into the session tomorrow. But these were the 330, 338s here. Around, this is so messy now, I can't even see this. This is so messy. These were the 338, 339 when they started triggering 8-7. Okay? Does that make sense why this would be a calculated time? But it's not just a calculated time. This is on a calculated price too. These are probably the 370s here, which I didn't really find that much importance around 370-minute intervals anyway, but... What? No. I'm just showing you that what it could have netted if you did the inverse and you failed at this point in time here. If this was a stick down. Do you get what I'm saying? If they didn't clear 09, 11, 12, 73, 22, 27, which was our breaker, okay? It's kind of a much bigger picture frame. Are you subscribed on Substack? Like at least to the free side? Or no? If you're not, then you should, and then just kind of follow along. You can even like look at the visuals that I posted in there too. I think that kind of helps. Because I did make some pretty nice visuals. This was my overnight visual. Can you see that? This is so overnight. This is the big spot. And do you see what they did at that time on that stick? That's what they broke, okay? And they also held 9195, which was very important, okay, to hold that. And then clear this 0911. Basically getting that gives you the breaks of 73, 20, 22. 27 was the expansion confirmation. And if you look at this, look at where we held in real time today. We literally held 73.27, okay? So that's a confirmation that they're going to get this. Do you get what I'm saying? This is where structure starts to base. These are the first major spots, 5.8, 6.6, 7.1. I didn't put anything between 7.1 and 8.8, not because there isn't, like there obviously is around 7.8, 8.3, but 8.8 to 9.1 is more important. That's kind of like a major expansion zone, and that's kind of what could get you to that big trigger. But okay, this, and that's the decision zone. So we just looked at this. If they had not done that, they could have returned it back to 72.44, which would have basically just put us back at risk of this. And we just did the math. It would have equated back to 72.22. We just looked at that. 72.44, 72.06, 7200, 71.70, right? So the math makes sense. If they had failed and if they did it around that exact point in time, then that would have played out on the downside. Do you get what I'm saying? I have to make sure that like my scenarios also make sense on the inverse side if that condition wasn't met, okay? It's all about logic and conditions, and like all of that has to be met for these things to trigger. So right now, what do you think my logic is? Obviously, I have to break, okay? So need to clear 7391 during this interval, okay? Like these are obviously big intervals that could get us here. Okay, this is the next like target area, I guess, but essentially here. And I know this looks very crazy to look at, but honestly, like sometimes when people ask me things, they're like, this seems very complex. Well, like, yeah, no shit. Obviously, it's going to be complex to try timing exact highs, exact lows, exact range, exact open, exact close. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, do you know how hard that is to time the exact minute that a price is going to hit? Like hours in advance. That is insanely hard. And then to know which price point is linked to which price point on like a math basis, and to try memorizing every interval that's linked to that price and time, that is a very, very, very hard thing to do. So if I make it look a little bit easy, it's not. Like this requires a lot of work even on my part to get this right, okay? So if we had done the inverse today, then we could have had like a really nice short today to 72.44, 72.20, maybe back to 7200. Do you get what I'm saying? 71.70s, 71.50s. That would kind of negate the progress we made this week and prevent us from getting that full 430, 460 point move, which we're getting today. So let's see. I'm going to do a poll. I didn't really do any today. What do you guys think? Max range for real-time session. We do have odds for those max time intervals. Technically speaking, this is enough range, around 73, 88, 91, to be considered max range for the session, but because we're in an expansion window, like that's what could change things a little bit. So let's see. Highs are in 73.91 to 73.94. 4 or 5 area. That area was pretty heavy. 73.99 to 74.01, 74.04 to 74.08. How many think that we could get to 74.14 to 74? It's so weird typing 74.20. That's actually crazy. Okay, I'll set that for 5 minutes, and then you guys can vote on that. Those on YouTube, you can just answer in the chat, I guess, but again, these are, like I said, they're enough to be considered a max range. It's really just, at this point, relative to how much more the market wants to break on today's session, I guess. Can you guys vote on that poll, please? Don't let the poll end and then like have like 5 people vote or something. These are such big sessions that it's important that you at least try to participate so that you can get a better grasp of understanding range, max range scenarios. That's something that's very, very, very hard to do. Okay. Based on, so there's 2 factors that are kind of clashing. Oh wow, oh my god, you guys, and these are right off these 350, and we have odds. This is the time. Holy shit. 73.94, 75 triggering at 350 is insane, because these are the intervals. They're at 351 and 353 today, and they're triggering exactly 9475, you guys. That means that they really could try to push this. Okay, I need to focus. Okay, do whatever you guys want, but I need to focus. Okay, let's take a look here. So 73.94.75 is very calculated. Okay, they're trying to hold the line off that 5-1. They didn't break it down. These are basically the times and points that they have to clear 9-1, 9-4 by. I always watch 54, 55, but today's intervals were at 53. These were like more calculated times, but and we have those odds basically till right into end of session today at 3:59 for just a little bit after the bell. I wonder if there's going to be news, because there's a lot of odds like a few minutes after the bell today. These are like the first major spots on these breaks. There's some overhead around 9-9, 9-8, and then 0-4. I don't know if we'll get max range. That would be insane, but I was thinking maybe they can get like this area here, like 12, 08, 06, because these are enough to technically keep it pinnable in this area here. So I really think it's going to depend on what they do between 353 and 356. Okay, guys? I don't have all of these marked, but this is one of the calculated times. The 353. So we'll see if they can try taking out this. I need to set alerts. It tagged 9.5. It didn't quite take it out. So majority voted for 9195. Second place was 9901. Fourth place was 7414, 7420. 3 people voted for highs or end. No one voted for 7404, 7408. That's where I think they could take it to. I didn't vote, but that's what I thought. So no one voted for what I thought that they could do, but that's what I'm thinking, because these would be like potential max ranges. Obviously, if they want to push and expand, then it would be on a break of 7400, 7404, and those would be like single stick breaks. But this is what I was thinking for real time. I could be wrong. We'll see. A lot of this is going to depend on, like I said, clearing this 995. Even though the calculated time was 53, they did retest it here. Like I said, I would give 55, 56 as the cutoff, because these are usual flips. 5-6 today is, I should mark that a different color. This is calculated. These are calculated. These ones, let me change the color. And like I said, we have odds basically till close. So usually when you have odds till close, what does that mean? What does it mean when you have odds till end of session, typically? Those SPY contracts, you guys, are up 7,000% on the session today. That is insane. That is crazy. So what does it mean when you normally... Yes, or highs can trigger at exactly end of day, right? Especially if conditions are met pre... So, okay, 9.5 close is good. You guys, 9.5 close at 3:55 is a good thing. We'll see if they can try clearing over at least 9.675. How much time is left in this stick? These are really big spots, so remember, these are the 430, 431. I could be off, you guys, because I didn't measure exactly. These are the 429, 430, 431, 460, okay, 461, 466. These are these intervals, okay? If you want to take the time and go measure that yourself, go ahead. These are the closest I was going to get to doing this in real time, because I didn't want to get too distracted from my positions. They're still holding off 9.3, but I do think they need a little bit higher to have a continuation into close. I'm going to make an Excel spreadsheet tonight if I have time, just so I don't have to keep manually entering all of those ratios, but the 5-1 stick is what delayed us because they stalled. But remember how I said that we have those 1.25 offsets today? Probably why they're stalling. Also probably why they didn't fully clear here. Right here. What time is it? 58. I would say condition would be, these are obviously very, very, very pinnable spots between 73.91 and 96. Like, that's a no-brainer. But if they can get this back over this probably minimum 9.475, ideally 9.5, then they would have that shot to try hitting that 9.9. So I don't know. They might just make it a psych barrier too of 7,400 not triggering in real time. This is basically what delayed this, but again, there's odds. Odds today were at 4, 402, 405. So that's why I'm wondering if they're going to do like an after hours move here. Do you see the reduction, guys? Like they basically stalled for almost 4 points, and that's what stalled us from getting 73.99.50. We'll see if they can trigger 7,395 within the first 30-second interval here. So here, then they still could have those odds. Okay, let's see. It'll be mostly if they can break it within this half. If they stall, then they're going to probably keep this pinnable within these ranges that we looked at. I think this 30-second half is probably more important. To me, that looks like a stall, in my opinion, but... And mainly because these are enough to be considered max range for the session today. Good job, guys, on voting for the 9-1 to 9-6 area, especially on a 9-5 stall. Odds were higher for 4, 402, 405, so they could just try turning it right back around in this window, but 73, 86, 75 pin, that's not bad. That makes sense based on those reductions again, because I feel like if they would have pinned 8-8, then that would have been like a 0.25 higher or something. That's not a bad pin. I held 3 contracts overnight. I mean, it's not much, but it was pretty decent entries. I feel like it's worth at least seeing what they do into tomorrow. This isn't a bad close, but I do think 8-8 would have been a bit better. So it's above 8-3-7-5, but still beneath this 8-8-9-1. I just want to see if they'll turn this back around here at the 402 mark, because these were some after hour odds. There's also some odds around. It's still going to be after SPY closes, but just give me a second though. Hold on. Did anyone measure how much reduction happened off that period? Because this can also give you a very huge pointer, you guys, on... Oh, they held that 11.5 range on like what the max range for real time could end up being. So I wonder if it's around that 74.04, 05, 06, 08. That's where I figured would be max had they pushed, but they obviously stalled 9.5. That's pretty cool that that would align well with those ratios there if they're successful in bringing this back. This is more than enough range though to be considered. Like the fact that they're pinning at these spots, guys, is crazy, because this is exactly what they did on Friday's session. So I would just look to see if this 02 can get back over 9.1 and if they could try retracting by 405. I'm pretty sure it was 405. Okay, I'm gonna sign off. I'm extremely tired. So nice session today. I'll let you guys know if I do a report tonight or tomorrow. I kind of already did a secondary report and some notes and extra visuals, but really at this point it's kind of just continuation odds. And I'm gonna see if I can get this stream transcribed. Sometimes it takes up to 24 hours to do so, and I forgot to turn the stupid bot on, so I hope you guys did well. But anyway, what a good session. Okay,